Hey guys, tonight we're setting foot in an era more fragrant than a Yankee candle store set on fire, Victorian England. But before you breathe too deeply, a warning. The scent wafting through the streets isn't exactly lavender and bergamot. Tonight, we're diving nose first into the underarm of history to answer the question you didn't know you needed. Why did Victorian women smell so unforgettable? We're talking about a time before deodorant, showers, or even the basic decency of a polite "please crack a window." So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. But let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered, how did women survive a summer in wool dresses, corsets, and a 6-pound hairpiece with no air conditioning? Did anyone ever try to Febreze a crinoline? How many days could you go without a bath before your cat started to judge you? Were floral perfumes just a cover-up? Or did they mix with body odor to create odor regret? Would you survive a Victorian dinner party? Or would you quietly expire under a mountain of unwashed lace? Could love flourish if you smelled like you'd lost a fight with a cheese wheel? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1853, London. You're a Victorian woman. You own 2 dresses, 0 deodorant, and enough social anxiety to power a steam engine. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so are your armpits. You wake up in a small, stuffy bedroom layered with the scent of old furniture and last night's boiled cabbage. Personal hygiene is less of a ritual, more of an afterthought. Your wash consists of splashing tepid water on your face and pretending that rubbing your wrists with rosewater counts as a full-body cleanse. The real question: is it better to wake up smelling like last night's stew or yesterday's sweat? It's early morning, but the air is already thick. Your window, if you're lucky enough to have one, is painted shut for most of the year, more for keeping out London's infamous fresh air, red, fog and horse emissions, than for privacy. The quilt on your bed is heavy, musty, and, let's be honest, hasn't seen a wash since Victoria's first Jubilee. You slept in your underthings, which are really just yesterday's chemise, now doing double duty as pajamas and daywear. As you peel yourself out of bed, you're greeted by a familiar symphony of smells: cabbage, dust, wood polish, and a faint undercurrent of feet. Not your feet, specifically, just, feet. There's no such thing as morning breath, because breath is just perpetually morning, afternoon, and evening. Your mouth tastes like you slept with a wool sock between your teeth, and maybe you did. Dental hygiene is somewhere below dusting coal scuttle on your list of daily ambitions. Toothpaste exists, but it's more chalk and crushed oyster shells than minty fresh. You consider a quick rinse with cold water, but decide that's a task for fancy people. Instead, you chew a stick of licorice root and hope for the best. Kissing before breakfast? Not unless you're prepared to duel with a halitosis saber. Now, about the wash. Bathing, as in full body, all-in water immersion, is for birthdays, doctor's orders, and very special house guests. Instead, you fetch the ewer, a jug of water left out overnight, and now so cold it feels like punishment for a crime you don't remember committing. You dunk a corner of the towel in, dab at your face, behind your ears, and maybe, just maybe, a swift swipe to the underarms. The water is grey by the time you're done. The towel is also grey, but nobody's judging. Soap is a luxury and smells faintly of ash and animal fat. You keep it in a little tin to keep the mice from eating it. Most days, you make do with a dab of rose water or lavender water, more to keep up appearances than to actually remove any dirt. You splash a little on your wrists, behind your ears, and, if feeling extravagant, dab a bit on your handkerchief so you can discreetly sniff it during moments of social peril. If only masking body odor were as easy as muting yourself on a Zoom call. Your hair, artfully arranged last night, is now a minor disaster. You take your boar bristle brush and give it the requisite 100 strokes, supposedly to add shine and improve health. In reality, you're just moving yesterday's hair oil around and maybe dislodging a stray breadcrumb or two. Shampoo exists, but only as an abstract concept, usually eggs, gin, or the brave application of cold rainwater, all of which sounds suspiciously like a dare. As you dress, you realize you have two choices: the dress that smells like Sunday's dinner, or the one that smells like last month's cheese. You opt for whichever is less likely to draw comment at the breakfast table. Undergarments are quickly shaken out and declared good enough. Clean is relative. And that's the thing. In Victorian England, nobody really expects you to smell good. The goal is to smell less bad than everyone else. If you're particularly motivated, you might pin a sachet of dried lavender or clove to your bodice, an early attempt at personal air freshening. Otherwise, you simply lower your standards, raise your chin, and face the day. So, as you finally shuffle out of your tiny bedroom, hair brushed, face sort of washed, dressed in your least alarming frock, remember, in the morning routine of a Victorian woman, victory isn't a fresh start. It's simply emerging slightly less pungent than the wallpaper. And honestly, that's enough. Victorian fashion demands a full suit of armor, petticoats, chemises, corsets, bustles, and at least 3 layers of wool, even in July. Imagine wrapping yourself in a wet blanket, adding some anxiety, and then sealing it all in with a buttoned-up collar. Airflow? Not a chance. Every garment is a new opportunity for bacteria to flourish. Let's set the scene. You, a respectable Victorian woman, start your day staring into the wooden wardrobe where your choices are limited to 2 equally tragic options: yesterday's dress or the slightly less wrinkled special occasion gown. Forget about color coordinating. Your main concern is which one stands up on its own from accumulated grime. The phrase outfit repeat doesn't even begin to capture the reality. You and your dress are locked in a multi-week, codependent relationship. At some point, it's hard to tell who's supporting whom. First comes the chemise, your one thin barrier between skin and society. If it's made of cotton, you're high class. If linen, you're doing just fine. If it's something rougher, well, you develop character and calluses in all the wrong places. The chemise is, in theory, washable, but this happens about as often as a solar eclipse. After all, scrubbing out last week's sweat stains is a full-body workout that Victorian etiquette book kindly call robust exercise. On top of that, slide on the corset, laced up so tight you're genuinely surprised every time you inhale. The goal is a wasp waist, but what you get is a gentle reminder that your ribs are, in fact, bendable. Some women claim they can faint at will, others just pass out from compression. Every sigh sounds like a kettle about to boil over. The corset leaves deep impressions in your skin, and even deeper regrets in your soul. Breathing is overrated anyway. Then, petticoats. Not 1, not 2, but sometimes as many as 5. Each layer promises volume but delivers only heat, and the sensation that you're constantly being followed by your own laundry pile. Some petticoats are starched so stiff you could use them as emergency shelter in a downpour. Others are just wool, heavy, itchy, and always a little bit damp, no matter how long they've been hanging. Your thighs? 2 hamsters fighting inside a woolen sack. Now, add the crinoline, a contraption best described as a portable birdcage for your legs. Metal hoops and starched horsehair work together to make every doorway a potential hazard. You shuffle sideways through life, forever calculating angles. Your cat stares at you in terror. You knock over at least 1 candlestick a week and take out your own tea tray twice a month. Fashion is pain, but also apparently a contact sport. Outer skirts, bodices, and overskirts come next, usually wool, sometimes silk if you're showing off, but always heavy enough to make you long for a career as a nudist. The bodice buttons up to your throat and down to your wrists, Necklines are high enough to double as face masks. Sleeves are snug, restricting all but the daintiest of arm movements. Every time you raise your hand, it feels like your shoulder is signing up for military service. Now you must accessorize. Gloves, always, even indoors, because heaven forbid anyone sees your scandalous unwashed fingers. Stockings are pulled up and held in place with garters so tight they leave permanent tattoos. Boots or lace-up shoes, stiff as plywood, are squeezed onto feet that haven't seen the light of day since Easter. Add a shawl or mantle if it's chilly, and don't forget the hat, weighted with ribbons, feathers, and the occasional dead bird, taxidermy chic, darling. As you finally wobble out the door, you realize your dress weighs more than a toddler and has roughly the same hygiene standards. Air circulation is theoretical. Under your skirts, conditions are subtropical. The layers act as an incubator for every odor, and you become a walking greenhouse. Still, you nod politely and glide down the street, silently praying you don't have to run for the omnibus. And when someone comments, "My, you look radiant today," what they really mean is, "I hope I'm upwind." This is the Victorian dress code. Equal parts dignity, discomfort, and damp wool. If you make it through the day without passing out or tripping over your own crinoline, you're not just dressed, you're victorious. Strap in, literally. Your corset is made of whalebone, cinched so tight that deep breathing is an Olympic event. Forget about sweating discreetly. Trapped moisture becomes your constant, musky companion. Every time you sigh in frustration, the air grows slightly more humid. Let's take a moment to appreciate the marvel that is the Victorian corset. A garment engineered for one main purpose: the pursuit of the ideal waist. In theory, a well-fitted corset gives you poise, confidence, and the enviable hourglass figure of a Grecian statue. In practice, it's like trying to live your life inside a decorative mailbox. The ritual begins each morning, as your lady's maid, or if you're less fortunate, your nearest available sister, starts the slow, deliberate lacing process. She pulls the strings with the enthusiasm of someone tightening a cargo ship's moorings, while you clutch the bedpost and make promises to every saint you can remember. As the corset tightens, your internal organs make their annual migration upward, downward, or simply out of the way. Stomach, liver, lungs, all are gently but firmly relocated to maximize that coveted 18-inch waist. Rumor has it Queen Victoria herself managed a 22-inch circumference, but only after giving up the idea of ever sitting down again. For the rest of us, we settle for whatever measurement keeps us conscious through breakfast. Sitting, by the way, is its own negotiation. The corset demands that you perch, not lounge. Your spine is perfectly straight, shoulders back, chin up, posture so good you could balance a tray of scones on your head. But heaven help you if you need to bend over. Dropping a handkerchief means making a choice. Do you squat, risking the structural integrity of your petticoats? Or do you attempt the awkward side bend move, which Victorian etiquette books never mention but everyone secretly practices? Of course, breathing becomes an adventure. Forget taking a deep, satisfying inhale. Your lungs now work on a subscription model. 3 shallow breaths per sigh, with a free wheeze for every exhale. Climbing stairs is now classified as light cardio. Getting too animated in conversation? Big mistake. You may find yourself light-headed, vision swimming, and forced to excuse yourself with the classic feminine vapors, which is Victorian for "I can't feel my feet." Fainting is so common that fainting couches are a legitimate piece of furniture. Think of them as the Victorian version of the panic room, but for your circulation. Let's not forget the sweat. A tightly laced corset, worn under layers of linen, wool, and silk, traps heat with the efficiency of a slow cooker. Every movement squeezes perspiration into places no sunlight has ever reached. By noon, you've become a human humidifier. discreetly dabbing at your temples with a lace handkerchief and praying the perfume on your wrists holds out. By evening, your chemise is welded to your skin, and you're one false move away from an embarrassing squelch. And if you thought corsets only affected you, think again. A corset restricts your appetite, so lunch is more a suggestion than a meal. Bites are nibbled, sips are tiny, and if someone suggests just one more tart, you know you're going to be silently negotiating space with your own ribcage. Dinner parties are less about socializing, more about not passing out face first into the blancmange. Still, society says you're supposed to be delicate, ethereal, and untroubled by such mortal concerns as breathing or digestion. If you complain, you're told that beauty is sacrifice and that tight lacing shows discipline. But nobody mentions that discipline mostly involves not screaming while someone yanks your laces tighter. So you stand, smile, and exist as a monument to Victorian engineering, upright, cinched, and smelling faintly of effort, all for a waist measurement that fits somewhere between a family Bible and well-fed cat. At the end of the day, you peel off the corset with the weary relief of a knight doffing his armor after battle. Your ribs sigh. Your stomach resumes its natural shape, and for a brief, glorious moment, you can actually breathe. But tomorrow, it starts again. Beauty, after all, is only one laced rib away. Laundry is a Herculean task involving boiling cauldrons, lye soap that eats through skin, and hours of scrubbing. So, naturally, you do it as rarely as possible. Most undergarments get aired out by hanging in a drafty hallway, because actually washing them means risking the structural integrity of your only chemise. Let's start with the reality. In Victorian England, laundry is a full-day, multi-person event, scheduled with the same seriousness as a royal visit. You might think modern laundry is tedious, sorting socks, dodging lost coins, fishing for stray tissues, but try it Victorian style, and you'll have a new appreciation for your washing machine. There are no magical buttons, no quick wash settings, and definitely no gentle spin cycle. The only things spinning are your arms, and by noon they feel like you've wrestled a stubborn ox. First comes the gathering. Everything that even thinks about being washed is rounded up. Chemises, petticoats, stockings, and occasionally a dress if it's had a run. In with gravy or the family cat. Don't expect a full wardrobe rotation. Clothes are precious, fabric is expensive, and frequent washing shortens a garment's lifespan. Spot cleaning is a polite way of saying, scrub the stain and hope for the best. Next, the soaking. A giant tub, think bathtub for trolls, is filled with water, heated over the kitchen range. This requires servants, or, for middle classes, some determined relatives to haul endless buckets from the well or pump. Hot water isn't just a luxury, it's an achievement. Your laundry room is the kitchen, your hands are the agitator, and your hopes for dry skin are a memory. Soap is another story. Victorian soap is a homemade science experiment. Equal parts animal fat, lye, and the haunting suspicion that it might dissolve your fingerprints. It's yellow, crumbly, and as gentle as sandpaper. Laundry day is basically an exfoliation ritual you never asked for. Bleach is simply old urine. No, really. Saved in buckets and added for that extra clean result. Suddenly, spring fresh scent sounds like a fantasy novel. Scrubbing is the main event. Garments are slapped onto washboards and attacked with the ferocity of someone fighting for their life. It's elbow grease or nothing. Victorian stains are legendary. Ink, mud, sweat, gravy, mystery blotches. You scrub until the fabric gives up, or you do. If you're lucky, there's a mangle, a set of hand-cranked rollers to squeeze out water, and, if you're not careful, fingers. Rinsing comes next. If you think a rinse means remove all soap, think again. It's usually just a hurried dunk in cold water before wringing out by hand. If your dress was white at the start of the year, it'll be beige by autumn. If it was colored, it fades to a shade, best described as Victorian sadness. Drying? That's an adventure all its own. Undergarments and stockings are hung over a line in the garden, or, if it's raining, which it always is, over chairs by the kitchen fire. Everything dries stiff, scratchy, and suspiciously warped. Your best hope is that nothing blows away or gets borrowed by a passing neighbor. That chemise may never be seen again. And then, ironing. Yes, after all that, someone has to iron the creases out of every last petticoat and sleeve. The iron is a solid brick of metal, heated over the fire until you can smell singed wool from 3 rooms away. Every iron comes with the thrill of possibly burning a hole straight through your only presentable dress. Laundry day ends with everything mostly clean, vaguely dry, and a kitchen that smells like boiling socks and burnt soap. You collapse, arms aching, hands raw, and swear to wear your undergarments just one more day, maybe 2, before braving it all again. In the Victorian world, cleanliness isn't next to godliness, it's next to impossible. So the next time someone complains about Laundry Mountain, remember, at least your pile never tried to take your fingerprints. Hair is your crowning gloria. More accurately, your oily tiara. You might brush it 100 times, but you rarely wash it. Dry shampoo? That's just flour and wishful thinking. If your hair gets really out of control, you might rub in a little goose fat or pomade, then sprinkle with scented powder. Voila! Instant Victorian volume and seagull attraction. Let's start at the roots. Quite literally, Victorian hair care is built on the philosophy of do less, hope for the best. You begin your morning at the vanity, facing a mop of hair that has spent the night twisted in a plait or wound up in rags for curls. You remove the pins, unroll your tresses, and survey the results. If your hair has a sheen, congratulations. It's not health. It's last week's natural oils, and possibly a trace of last night's mutton stew. Washing your hair, in the modern sense, is rare and slightly scandalous. Maybe every few weeks, if you're feeling especially decadent or if your scalp starts to resemble a candle. Hot water is precious. Soap is harsh, and shampoo, as we know it, simply doesn't exist. Recipes for hair wash often include things like eggs, brandy, or a splash of rainwater collected in a pan left out during the one sunny day in May. The resulting mixture is more breakfast than beauty product. For the most part, you embrace your natural oils. Victorian beauty magazines insist that frequent washing weakens hair and encourages colds. Instead, you rely on brushing. 100 strokes a day, minimum, with a boar bristle brush that does double duty as a scalp massage and a workout for your triceps. The goal is to distribute oil from roots to tips, giving hair a glossy shine. In practice, it just means the brush picks up everything: dust, dandruff, stray bits of hay, and at least one secret crumb. Then comes the goose fat. Not a typo. Goose fat, bear grease, and various pomades are all considered essential for the glossy look. If you can't afford animal fats, you might use olive oil, which at least leaves you smelling like an optimistic salad. Once applied, you twist and braid your hair into intricate shapes, pinning it with metal hairpins and combs. Your updo will hold firm, possibly forever or until next laundry day. Dry shampoo is a fever dream, but Victorian women invent their own solutions. Flour, rice powder, and even cornstarch are dusted on the roots to absorb grease and give hair a fashionable powdery finish. The side effect: every time you touch your head, you leave a ghostly white fingerprint. Hug someone while wearing black, and you'll leave your mark like a Victorian spectre. Wigs and hairpieces are all the rage. If your hair is thinning, or if you just want to keep up with the towering hairdos of the day, you buy a switch or rat. The rat isn't a rodent, it's a pad made from your own shed hair, collected from brushes and carefully stored for months. You stuff it under your real hair to add volume. Some women collect so much hair over the years, it's rumored they could assemble a spare daughter. And then there's the matter of scent. If your hair starts to smell musty, you have options. Spritz on rose water, dab it with lavender oil, or go full herbalist and tuck sprigs of rosemary or thyme into your braids. If all else fails, you simply hope everyone is too polite or too stuffed up from coal dust to mention it. Society expects you to be presentable, but presentable is flexible. You make peace with the flyaways, the hidden tangles, and the faint whiff of roast chicken. At the end of the day, your hair is less about perfection and more about perseverance. You wear it like a badge of endurance, pinned, powdered, perfumed, and proudly unwashed. So next time you complain about a bad hair day, just remember, at least you're not leaving a trail of goose fat and rice flour wherever you go. For the Victorian woman, that's just part of the morning routine. Baths are an event, maybe weekly, maybe monthly, maybe I'll just use more perfume. Filling a tub requires servants to haul buckets of water, heat it over a fire, and then awkwardly leave you alone with your existential dread. Most women make do with a damp washcloth, a prayer, and a hope that nobody comes too close. Let's set the scene. You, in all your Victorian glory, contemplating a bath. Bathing, in the full sense, isn't something you do to start the day. It's something you schedule in advance, like a doctor's visit or a royal coronation. The word routine doesn't apply here. Ordeal is more accurate. The process begins with announcing your intentions, which immediately put half the household into a mild panic. First, the water. There's no faucet, no magic tap. Instead, someone must fetch bucket after bucket from the well or pump. If you're lucky, you live in a house with a scullery maid or an overenthusiastic younger sibling. If not, you're carrying those buckets yourself, and by the end of it, you're already sweaty enough to need another bath. The water is then poured into a great tin or wooden tub, often parked in front of the kitchen fire. Privacy is a myth. Doors don't always latch. Siblings wander through, and at least one cat insists on supervising. Next, the water must be heated. This means stoking the fire, wrestling with coal or wood, and waiting, and waiting. The result is a lukewarm bath at best, and a chilling plunge at worst. By the time you undress and step in, the water temperature is somewhere between swamp and forgotten teacup. You bathe quickly, not just to conserve modesty, but to avoid freezing to death. Soap, as always, is an adventure. It's a harsh lye soap that strips both dirt and hope from your skin. Scented soaps are a rare luxury. Most likely you're rubbing yourself down with a yellow bar that smells like disappointment and sheep. Victorian advice books encourage vigorous scrubbing, but most people interpret this as a quick dab to the ankles and wrists. After all, overwashing is said to weaken the constitution. There's genuine suspicion that too much bathing opens the pores and invites disease. Cleanliness may be next to godliness, but only if godliness is also skeptical about germs. Because of the ordeal, most people skip the full bath and opt for a sponge bath. This is exactly what it sounds like. You grab a damp cloth and clean what's visible. Underarms, face, hands, anywhere likely to peek out of your high-necked dress. Legs, back, and feet are politely ignored unless absolutely necessary. For everything else, there's perfume and a heartfelt denial. On the rare occasion you do get a proper bath, there's the issue of what to do with the water. Victorian plumbing is not up to modern standards. You bail it out bucket by bucket, or dump it into the nearest garden bed, which promptly dies from shock. If your entire family shares the tub, and they do, the pecking order matters. Eldest first, then siblings, then the family dog, then possibly a neighbour if they've brought cake. By the end, the water resembles a tea brewed from socks. Public bathhouses exist, but are suspect, rumoured sites of gossip, scandal, and disease. The truly desperate or cosmopolitan might venture in, but most Victorian women avoid the risk. Reputation, after all, is harder to scrub clean than ankles. So, when you read historical novels describing ladies fresh from their bath, know that this is creative license at its finest. Most Victorian women make peace with their own gentle aroma and hope the lavender sachet pinned to their petticoat pulls its weight. When in doubt, don't. And if all else fails, stand upwind and smile. In Victorian England, the cleanest thing about you might just be your conscience. With everyone smelling like a combination of goat and mildew, Victorian women develop a love affair with perfume. You dab on rosewater, violet, lavender, or straight-up musk, hoping to mask the truth. Instead, you end up marinating in a floral stew that's one sneeze away from a chemical incident. Let's be honest. In a world where laundry day is rare and bathing is reserved for the bold, perfume isn't a luxury. It's a defensive strategy. The perfume bottle isn't just a pretty accessory on your vanity. It's your most loyal companion, right up there with your fainting couch and a sturdy sense of denial. The goal is simple. Create a pleasant enough olfactory smokescreen that your own mother wouldn't recognize you by scent alone. The Victorian perfume arsenal is both vast and potent. You start with floral waters, rose, lavender, orange blossom, each promising to transport you to a lush English garden, far away from the actual English garden outside, which is full of manure and stray chickens. These delicate scents are dabbed on wrists, neck, and handkerchiefs, then topped up throughout the day. For special occasions, there's a tar of violets or perhaps a touch of gardenia, making you smell like a bridal bouquet left on the radiator. But as the day wears on and the city air thickens, the stakes get higher. Subtlety is abandoned in favor of raw power. Out come the heavy hitters, musk, ambergris, and civet, a trio so potent you could use them to fumigate an entire train carriage. Musk is technically derived from the glands of a musk deer. Ambergris is a mysterious, waxy substance regurgitated by sperm whales, and civet comes from a small, angry cat-like animal with opinions about hygiene. If it sounds like something found at the back of a mysterious drawer, you're on the right track. Layering is the secret weapon. A true Victorian scent wardrobe involves dabbing perfume behind the ears, on the chest, in the hair, and, if you're feeling thorough, directly onto your handkerchief, so you can wave it under your nose in moments of crisis. Some women sew tiny sachets of dried herbs into their skirts or pin scented ribbons inside their bodices, anything to keep the world at bay. By the time you leave the house, you've created your own personal ecosystem, rich with botanical diversity and possibly a few chemical hazards. Perfume isn't just about personal use either. Your entire environment gets the aromatic treatment. Wardrobes are lined with lavender, rooms are spritzed with cologne, and letters are scented before sending, so the recipient will think fondly of you, or at least know you tried. It's a scent arms race, and victory means never being remembered as the one who smelled of boiled cabbage. Of course, not all perfumes are created equal. The finest scents are imported from France and cost as much as a month's rent. Cheaper options are concocted by local chemists, using questionable alcohol and whatever flowers survived the journey from the market. Sometimes, a bottle turns, and the wearer is followed by a note of vinegar and regret. There are cautionary tales of women who mixed too many scents and fainted in church, or whose hair, oil, and perfume clashed so badly it started an argument at the dinner table. Perfume is also a powerful social signal. The right scent suggests refinement, wealth, and an enviable sense of restraint. The wrong scent, or too much of the right one, can signal desperation or, worse, poor taste. There's an art to it, one perfected only through practice and, occasionally, hard lessons. If someone hands you a lemon-scented handkerchief mid-conversation, you know you've overdone it. In the end, perfume is a daily gamble, a drop of elegance in a sea of uncertainty. You might walk through the world as a fragrant breeze or as a walking cautionary tale. Either way, in Victorian England, the only thing thicker than the fog is the cloud of scent you leave in your wake. And if all else fails, remember, in the battle against body odor, all is fair in love, war, and rosewater. Toothpaste is more likely to be chalk, charcoal, or ground cuttlefish bone than anything minty fresh. Brushing is sporadic, mouthwash is a rumor, and dentists are to be avoided at all costs. Morning breath lingers all day, no matter how many times you gnaw on a licorice root. Let's be honest, Victorian dental care is less about shining smiles and more about crisis management. You wake up with the taste of defeat, and the first thing you do is reach for the toothbrush, if you even own one. Most toothbrushes are little more than a carved stick with stiff boar hair, which, after a few weeks, is as inviting as brushing with a hedgehog. The bristles fall out, the handle splinters, and that suspicious black spot on your back molar, you name him Harold and pretend he's a birthmark. Toothpaste is an adventure of its own. Forget gentle whitening formulas. In Victorian England, the most common option is a gritty powder made of chalk, salt, baking soda, or, if you're feeling bold, powdered charcoal. Sometimes, someone suggests crushed eggshells or cuttlefish bone, which works about as well as scrubbing your mouth with a sandcastle. The rich might import mysterious dentifrices in little tins, often promising breath as fresh as a daisy but delivering a flavor profile closer to burnt oyster. Mouthwash is barely a rumor. Some try rinsing with vinegar, lemon water, or straight gin, which explains a lot about Victorian poetry. But the most widespread treatment for bad breath is simply to chew something: cloves, cardamom, anise, or licorice root, anything to outmuscle the internal rot. Sometimes a sprig of mint is pressed under the tongue before church or social calls. The effect is temporary and mostly psychological. If you talk too much, everyone knows. Dental work is, in a word, terrifying. There are no modern dentists, just barbers, blacksmiths, or the brave neighborhood tooth drawer. Their qualifications? A strong grip, a bottle of gin, and a high tolerance for screaming. Cavities are not filled. They are ignored until they become a public menace. Toothaches are treated with hot poultices, prayers, or, if all else fails, extraction with pliers that have also seen duty on wagon wheels and sheep hooves. Losing a tooth is practically a rite of passage. By your mid-20s, you're missing at least a few. Smiling wide in Victorian England is less dazzling and more haunted doll collection. If you're wealthy and vain, you might invest in a partial denture, crafted from ivory, porcelain, or, in a pinch, the teeth of the recently deceased. Nothing says romance like knowing you're kissing the ghost of someone's molar. Breath is another battlefield. The Victorian diet. Lots of onions, cabbage, pickled fish, and tea. Guarantees that your exhalations could peel wallpaper. Morning breath is optimistic. It's more like lifelong breath. If you're going out, you keep a scented handkerchief handy, dabbing it to your lips and nose before conversation. Social etiquette dictates that you don't speak directly at someone's face, not out of politeness, but out of mercy. For courtship, things get even more complicated. Love letters are perfumed and poetic, but kisses are rare, and not just because of propriety. The risk of encountering a whiff of old cheese and panic is very real. Sometimes, the anticipation of romance is sweeter than the experience itself, especially when halitosis becomes a third party. By the end of the day, your teeth ache, your gums are inflamed, and your tongue feels like it's been sanded. You rinse with tepid water, hope for the best, and pray that science will one day invent mint. Until then, you flash your crooked smile, mumble your compliments, and keep your handkerchief close. Because in Victorian England, dental woes are as much a part of femininity as petticoats and perfume. If you can smile through the pain, you're already ahead. If you can laugh about it, you're a legend. You squeeze into a horse-drawn omnibus, pressed against strangers in a cloud of collective misery. Every jostle unleashes new aromas: body odor, hair tonic, damp wool, and the unmistakable tang of someone who ate pickled onions for breakfast. Let's set the mood. It's a chilly morning in Victorian London, and you have places to be. Walking is an option, but after a week of tramping over cobblestones in ankle-pinching boots, your feet are staging a mutiny. So you opt for the marvel of modern technology: public transport. The horse-drawn omnibus, a wooden box on wheels pulled by two determined horses and powered by sheer optimism, promises efficiency and, at least in theory, community spirit. Reality is less inspiring. You approach the stop and are greeted by a scrum of humanity. There's no queue, just a polite free-for-all. The vehicle itself is a rolling time capsule, its interior lined with well-worn, scratchy benches. The moment the door opens, you are swept inside on a tide of elbows, reticules, and the occasional live chicken. You find yourself wedged between a matron in 3 layers of shawl and a bearded man who appears to have confused aftershave with turpentine. Personal space is a forgotten concept. You're pressed shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, thigh to thigh, breathing the shared air of a dozen fellow travelers. With every pothole, someone's hat lands in your lap, and you spend at least 5 minutes politely extracting a stranger's umbrella from your petticoats. Windows remain closed to keep out the London miasma, trapping every cough, sigh, and bodily vapour. If you're lucky, you have a seat. If not, you cling to the nearest strap, swaying with the rhythm of the city and praying your balance outlasts the horses. Then there's the issue of temperature. In winter, it's a mobile refrigerator, your nose pressed to the glass as your breath fogs up the pane. In summer, the heat rises like a tidal wave, intensifying the perfume of unwashed wool, coal smoke, and anxiety. The only breeze comes from the door swinging open at each stop, momentarily blessing you with cold air and cursing you with a fresh gust of city stench. A sensory buffet unfolds. To your right, a child sucks on a sticky peppermint, smearing it into the velvet upholstery. To your left, a gentleman reads his newspaper at full wingspan, elbowing you every time he turns the page. Somewhere at the back, a nervous lapdog is doing its best impression of a foghorn. The floor is a patchwork of dropped crumbs, muddy boot prints, and, occasionally, something suspiciously sticky. There is an unspoken etiquette to this chaos. Eye contact is avoided. Conversation is minimal. You may exchange a weary nod, a silent apology when your parasol jabs someone's ribs, or a quiet excuse me as you disembark. If someone sneezes, the entire vehicle stiffens, each passenger delicately retrieving a scented handkerchief to cover their nose and mouth, half out of fear of contagion, half out of self-defense against the unleashed aroma. Fashion, of course, makes things worse. Heavy dresses and endless petticoats trap heat, and woolen coats never fully dry in the damp city air. Gloves, meant to protect you from the elements, become little ovens for your hands. Bonnets slip, veils unravel, and the ever-present hat pin threatens the safety of anyone within a 6-inch radius. As you near your stop, the true challenge begins. Exiting with grace. You rise, gather your skirt, and begin the delicate sidestep through the crush of bodies. Someone steps on your hem, a boot scrapes your ankle, and for one desperate moment, you're certain you'll never be free. But at last you tumble onto the street, sweaty, breathless, and acutely aware of what everyone in London had for breakfast. In Victorian public transport, dignity is optional, but if you make it out with your hat, your handbag, and most of your personal scent intact, you can consider it a victory lap. A dozen people gather in a poorly ventilated salon, candles flickering and windows closed against the London smog. Perfume collides with perspiration, roast beef, and the faint whiff of coal smoke. You sip your tea, smile politely, and try not to pass out. The Victorian dinner party is the pinnacle of social ambition. A chance to display your best manners, your finest gown, and, most importantly, your ability to remain upright in a room thick enough to butter. You receive the invitation with both excitement and dread. On one hand, It's a break from your routine of staring at the wallpaper and listening to the grandfather clock. On the other, it's a high-stakes test of personal endurance, olfactory resilience, and the strength of your corset. Preparations begin hours before dusk. You squeeze yourself into your most extravagant dress, complete with all available underpinnings and a hastily pinned sprig of lavender. A cloud of face powder and a heroic amount of hair pomade ensure that you're ready for anything except, perhaps, direct sunlight. Your family's best shoes emerge from hiding, along with gloves and that one slightly mysterious brooch you inherited from Aunt Mildred. You arrive, breathless, to find the front hall already buzzing with anticipation and the first hints of the evening's signature scent, a swirling blend of overcooked cabbage, tallow candles, nervous sweat, and the sharp tang of someone's experimental cologne. You hand off your cloak to a harried servant, say a silent prayer for ventilation, and brace yourself for a few hours of social acrobatics. The drawing room is a sea of stiff-backed chairs, upholstered in fabrics that have absorbed a century of family secrets and equally pungent dinners. The windows are shut tightly, both to preserve warmth and to keep out the legendary London fog, which, in Victorian terms, is just a polite word for airborne horse manure. The host makes introductions, each handshake a mini-challenge to identify the faintest notes of cheese, mutton, or mothball. Small talk is both an art and a survival tactic. You comment on the weather, on the Queen's latest portrait, and on the tragic state of the neighbour's begonias, all while tactically manoeuvring yourself closer to the sideboard, where the air is slightly more breathable. The room, already stuffy, grows even closer as guests settle into their seats and the candles multiply. Candlelight flatters the complexion but does nothing for the air quality. Dinner is announced with the clang of a gong and a wave of anticipation and dread. You shuffle into the dining room, a place of beauty, grandeur, and questionable ventilation. The meal is a marathon, with course after course parading past. Boiled beef, game pies, jellied eels, and the always suspicious blancmange. Every new dish brings a new wave of scent to join the ever-expanding cloud. By dessert, the air is sweet, heavy, and not entirely safe. Throughout it all, you are expected to maintain perfect posture, engage in witty repartee, and, above all, never break a sweat. The pressure is real. You dab at your brow with a lace handkerchief and try not to dwell on the knowledge that every inch of your dress, your chair, and your very soul is slowly absorbing the room's atmosphere like a tragic sponge. As the evening stretches on, you yearn for escape, a breath of fresh air, or even the faintly mouldy stairwell. But leaving early is the height of rudeness, so you endure. When the clock strikes the magic hour, you rise, thank your host, and make your way to the hall, only slightly dizzy from the combined effects of perfume, pastry, and suppressed panic. Finally, you step outside, gulp the cold night air, and realize you have survived another Victorian dinner party. The memory will linger. So will the scent, clinging to your hair, your dress, and your dreams. In the world of Victorian hospitality, survival is an achievement. And if you manage not to faint into the blancmange, you're practically royalty. Your underthings are expensive, hard to wash, and never quite dry. The unofficial rule: wear as long as you can, flip inside out, then air under the pillow. Some say you should change once a week. Others call that reckless extravagance. Victorian underwear is not designed for comfort or convenience. It's more an endurance sport, a delicate calculation involving fabric rationing, social reputation, and the unforgiving rhythms of laundry day. Unlike today's endless supply of seamless cotton briefs, your entire collection consists of perhaps 2 or 3 chemises and a couple pairs of drawers. If you're fortunate, the poor might have just one of each, handed down, patched, and mended so often that it's unclear which generation first wore them. Your day begins with a critical inspection. You hold your chemise up to the faint morning light, squinting at the stains. Is that just shadow, or something more sinister? A quick sniff test determines your next move. Sometimes, you'll shake out yesterday's drawers, declare them fresh enough, and soldier on. If in doubt, the old inside-out trick extends your laundry window. Victorian innovation at its finest. Laundry day is a whole ordeal, as we've established. Washing underthings means wrestling with boiling water, harsh soap, and a drying process that depends entirely on weather, luck, and how much space you can steal by the kitchen fire. Airing out is the common compromise. Chemises are draped over chairs or tucked beneath pillows, allowing them to breathe overnight. Whether this actually improves the scent or just distributes it more evenly is up for debate. Society's expectations aren't exactly clear. Etiquette books offer vague suggestions, typically written by women who've never scrubbed a petticoat. Change as often as cleanliness and comfort dictate, they say, carefully sidestepping the hard math of just how often that should be. Some declare that once or twice a week is respectable. Others, more ambitious or perhaps more optimistic, argue for daily changes, a notion that draws laughter in households where the family wash is a monthly trial by soap and steam. Hygiene is one thing, but reputation is another. It's a poorly kept secret that changing your underwear too frequently is considered almost suspicious, a sign that you are either ill or uncommonly fussy. Nobody wants to be the talk of the neighborhood for overwashing. In contrast, not changing often enough risks offending not just your own nose, but anyone unlucky enough to catch a whiff when you climb the stairs ahead of them. For those blessed with a lady's maid, the dilemma is slightly eased. Maids take responsibility for discreetly laundering, mending, and managing the delicate rotation, all while maintaining the sacred secrecy of their employer's habits. For everyone else, it's a solo dance, ferrying underthings to the wash, dodging the judgmental stares of siblings, and pretending not to notice if something goes missing from the communal drying line. The fabric itself is part of the puzzle. Fine cotton and linen are softer and, theoretically, easier to wash, but rougher fabrics, inherited or cheaply made, hold on to every scent and stain, like family heirlooms. Over time, even the best cared-for chemise will develop a certain patina, an eau de Victorian that is impervious to all but the most aggressive lye soap. Scented sachets, sprigs of lavender, and generous dabs of rosewater are deployed in desperation. But the effect is fleeting at best. At the end of the week, you look at your drawer, literally, the one pair you haven't worn yet, and calculate, is today the day, or can you push it just a little further? In the quiet of your bedroom, you make your decision, fortified by the knowledge that everyone else is facing the same mathematical dilemma. In the grand tradition of Victorian womanhood, underwear math is less about numbers and more about survival. If you can keep your composure and your secrets intact, you're doing just fine. Victorian women are expected to be the delicate flowers of society. But nobody mentions the greenhouse conditions under all those petticoats. You perspire quietly, clutching a handkerchief, and pretend that fainting is due to excitement, not dehydration and the toxic cloud brewing in your boots. Society's vision of feminine delicacy is precise and unwavering. You're to glide rather than walk, speak in gentle tones, and always appear perfectly serene. The prevailing belief is that women are fragile, more vulnerable to the vapors, swoons, and sudden attacks of genteel dizziness. But the real daily struggle isn't fending off existential ennui. It's managing the very practical problem of existing in a 12-layer sandwich of wool, cotton, and social expectation. The irony, of course, is that the more delicate you're meant to appear, the less delicate your life actually is. Your wardrobe alone weighs as much as a well-fed toddler, trapping heat and sweat with ruthless efficiency. By mid-morning, your chemise has turned into a personal steam room, and the corset is squeezing out moisture you didn't even know you could produce. Your petticoats become damp blankets, clinging stubbornly as you circulate through parlor and kitchen alike. Direct conversation about these bodily realities is strictly taboo. You are never to mention sweat, chafing, or, heaven forbid, body odor. If you need to freshen up, it's done with extreme subtlety. A dab of lavender water to the wrists, a discreet swipe of powder to the décolletage, a quick adjustment of your shawl to cover the spreading patch of underarm gloom. The rest is stoic endurance. Every social interaction becomes a test of poise. Can you listen to Aunt Gertrude's stories about the Crimea while ignoring the waterfall under your bodice? The art of fainting becomes its own coping mechanism. A well-timed swoon provides not only the illusion of feminine frailty, but a rare chance to escape to a cooler, less crowded room. Sometimes, if you're lucky, even a brisk walk in the garden. Friends and relatives flutter, blaming excitement or a nervous disposition. You, meanwhile, are just grateful to be away from the soup kitchen atmosphere beneath your dress. Foot care is another battlefield. Stockings, boots, and the universal law that women's shoes must always be too small ensure that by the end of the day, your feet are swampy ecosystems unto themselves. Removing your boots is a private ritual, best performed far from polite company and open flames. Powder and perfume offer only fleeting protection against the sock-shaped cloud that rises from your toes. Even rest is a sweaty, sticky affair. Nightgowns are made of thick cotton, and beds are built for insulation, not ventilation. On warm nights, you toss and turn in a tangle of linen sheets, haunted by the lingering scent of rosewater fighting a losing battle with reality. If you open a window, the risk of catching a chill sends your family into fits of panic. So you settle for fanning yourself with an old letter and waiting for dawn. Yet, through it all, you are expected to maintain an air of gentle dignity, never betraying your discomfort. The reward for your effort? The admiration of society, a reputation for grace, and, if you're lucky, a brief moment alone with your feet in a bucket of cold water. In truth, Victorian womanhood is less about fragile beauty and more about resilience. If you can keep a smile on your face while stewing in your own petticoats, you've mastered the fine art of being delicate but dank. Behind every composed exterior is a champion of endurance, armed with nothing but a handkerchief, a bottle of lavender water, and iron will. Because sometimes the sweetest smelling flower is the one that survives the most rain. Powder isn't just for your cheeks, it's for your chest, your armpits, and sometimes your feet. Talcum, rice, and even ground starch are sprinkled everywhere to absorb moisture and, in theory, kill odor. What actually happens is you leave a trail of ghostly footprints and a fine dust on every velvet sofa. Step inside the Victorian powder room, not a bathroom in the modern sense, but a literal room, or corner, or repurposed cupboard, where the tools of personal presentation are arranged like a miniature apothecary. On the table, you'll find ornate pots of powder, delicate puffs, and the subtle, lingering tension of everyone pretending not to notice what's really going on. Here, the battle against body moisture is waged in secrecy, with all the seriousness of a military campaign. The first weapon is the classic face powder, rice flour, zinc oxide, or, if you're wealthy, the most fashionable French talc. A few gentle pats with a velvet puff, and your complexion is transformed into a flawless porcelain mask. But that's just the beginning. As day heats up and your wardrobe becomes a woolen sauna, the need for more extensive powdering becomes apparent. The face is only the tip of the iceberg. The real battleground is underneath. Armpits, the forbidden frontier, society never mentions them. But every Victorian woman knows their perils. After your morning wash, that heroic dabbing of tepid water, you dry off and, with furtive glances, reach for your secret stash of powder. A generous dusting beneath the arms, across the chest, and along the back of your neck. You may even sprinkle a little into your corset, praying it reaches the right places before melting away. Powder offers the illusion of dryness and a faint floral scent, but in truth, it's mostly wishful thinking. Feet, too, require attention. After a day spent crammed into boots that were clearly designed by someone with a grudge against toes, your soles are crying out for relief. Out comes the powder box again. You dust your feet, ankles, and even the inside of your stockings, creating a soft, powdery cocoon. The floor below your dressing table becomes a snowy drift, and every step leaves a white print, a subtle, ghostly calling card in the hallway. Of course, all this powder has consequences. By afternoon, your once elegant black skirt is dusted with mysterious white patches. Every time you sit down, a small cloud rises, settling on the upholstery and drifting into the sunlight. The household cat, if it ventures too close, emerges looking like it's been through a bakery explosion. And heaven help you if it rains, powder and moisture combine into a sticky paste, leaving you feeling like a half-baked Victorian pastry. Despite the mess, powdering is as much about ritual as it is about results. Ladies gather in the powder room, exchanging tips and gossip as they reload their puffs. The more ambitious might blend their own scented concoctions. Lavender, rose, even hints of bergamot. For many, it's a comforting moment of privacy in a life otherwise lived in public scrutiny. There are, of course, rumors and warnings. Etiquette books gently caution against excessive powdering, suggesting it marks one as vain or worse, a tryhard. Some even whisper that too much powder can clog the pores and lead to an unladylike complexion, but practicality wins out. Especially on sweltering summer afternoons when the very air tastes of sweat and desperation. At the end of the day, you try to brush the worst of the dust from your gown, shake out your petticoats, and hope no one will notice the powdery outline of your form on the settee. The powder room is cleaned, the puffs return to their pots, and you prepare to face the evening, slightly paler, possibly drier, and forever leaving your mark wherever you go. Because in the Victorian era, true elegance isn't just about a flawless face. It's about outlasting the heat, the sweat, and the relentless march of daily grime, armed with nothing but a brave heart and a box of rice flour. London is a pungent tapestry of horse droppings, coal smoke, spilled beer, and raw sewage. Open a window for fresh air and instantly regret it. Close the window, and you marinate in your own personal ecosystem. Let's take a stroll through Victorian London, shall we? It's a bright morning, well, bright for the city, meaning the sunlight has fought its way through several layers of coal, soot, fog, and civic resignation. You step out your front door, prepared for a genteel promenade, only to be walloped by the city's signature aroma. A complex blend of manure, mud, and the ghost of last night's fish pie. The source of this olfactory onslaught is everywhere. For starters, the streets are rivers of chaos, thick with traffic and thicker with evidence left by the city's estimated 300,000 horses. Every wagon, cab, and carriage contributes to the grand urban compost heap. If you're not dodging fresh piles, you're dodging yesterday's, now churned into a muddy soup by countless boots. The Victorians did their best to clean up, street sweepers armed with brooms and heroic moustaches. But the battle was never truly won. As you walk, your boots collect a museum's worth of samples. You quickly learn to keep your skirts hoisted above the ankle and develop a delicate sidestep worthy of a ballet dancer. Street gutters run with all manner of filth, soapy grey water from laundresses, mysterious brown trickles from tenement drains, and the occasional blob of something best left unidentified. Sometimes, a pale child with a bucket chucks the contents of last night's chamber pot right into the street. If you're lucky, they shout "Gardy Lou." If not, you learn the value of reflexes and quick prayers. And then there's the river. The Thames, lifeblood and waste bin of the city, winds through town carrying with it the scents of every abattoir, brewery and household for miles. In summer, When the water is low and the sun is high, the great stink rises like a biblical warning. Those who can afford it flee to the countryside, while the rest plug their noses, stuff their windowsills with lime, or just become philosophical about breathing through the mouth. Shops and markets add to the sensory symphony. The fishmonger's stall announces itself half a street away. Butchers and poulterers dangle their wares over wooden boards, every surface glistening with drippings and optimism. Flower sellers valiantly fight back with buckets of violets and roses, but even they know it's a losing battle. The smell of roasting chestnuts, fried eels, and baking bread drifts temptingly on the air, mingling with less appetizing notes from the nearby tannery or glue factory. Public spaces are not much better. Parks offer brief reprieve, but the perfume of damp grass and trampled daisies is no match for the wind when it shifts and carries the scent of the city's refuse heap. Even statues seem to grimace as they watch endless parades of dogs, children, and dubious puddles pass by. On rainy days, the odors deepen and ferment. Every cobblestone becomes a petri dish. Every alleyway, a challenge to the strong-stomached. And what about home? You finally return, thinking you've escaped the sensory assault, only to realize every step has tracked the city right back through your own front hall. Boots are scraped, skirts shaken, but some smells cling with the stubbornness of unpaid rent. Airing out a room seems futile. Open the window, and you get a new batch of London. Keep it shut, and your own bouquet grows stronger by the hour. So, you make peace with it. You master the art of shallow breathing, the strategic use of handkerchiefs, and the delicate dance of city living. The smell of the street is the smell of life, messy, lively, and impossible to ignore. In Victorian London, you don't escape the city's perfume. You just learn to wear it with a little extra rose water. Victorian skincare means cold cream, rose water, and maybe a dab of lard. Baths strip away your protective layer of grime, so most women avoid overwashing. Acne? That's just your pores screaming for mercy under a patina of powder and oil. Let's take a long, hard look in the looking glass. You, a proper Victorian woman, are expected to present flawless, milk-white skin, smooth as porcelain, pure as the Queen's intentions. The reality is a little more textured. You wake up to discover your cheeks are suspiciously shiny, your forehead has taken on a sallow glow, and your chin is hosting a gathering of tiny, unwelcome guests. Dermatology, as a concept, is something for the distant, utopian future. For now, it's just you, your reflection, and a small army of homemade remedies. Morning skincare starts with a brisk splash of cold water, supposedly to close the pores and invigorate the constitution. The water is usually hard and suspiciously gritty, but you tell yourself it's character building. Soap, when used, is harsh and handmade, smelling faintly of tallow, ashes, or that one time you tried to clean a chimney. Too much soap, the experts warn, will strip away not only dirt, but the essential oils that protect your face from miasmas. Translation: if your skin feels vaguely slimy, you're doing it right. For cleansing, nothing beats cold cream. The stuff is an unctuous blend of animal fat, beeswax, and rosewater. You smear it on thick, then gently wipe away dirt, old powder, and whatever secrets the city air left behind. Cold cream does its best to moisturize and cleanse, but it leaves a residue so glossy that sunlight can be blinding if you stand near a window. Still, it's considered the height of feminine elegance. For stubborn grime or the occasional mascara mishap, usually lampblack or burnt match, a dab of olive oil, or, if you're feeling rustic, plain old lard does the trick. After cleansing, you pat on rose water or elderflower water. This is less about effectiveness and more about optimism. Victorian advertisements claim these waters refine the skin and banish all redness. In practice, they just leave you smelling faintly of tea cakes and garden parties. Still, you dab it on dutifully, sometimes with a soft cloth, sometimes with whatever's handy. Moisturizer, as we know it, doesn't exist, but the cold cream doubles as a night mask. In winter, when your cheeks are raw and your lips are peeling, you smear on a thick layer and hope for the best. On bad days, you might apply a compress of cucumber or potato slices and pray that the only people who see you are family and that they won't gossip. Powder comes next. Rice powder, or if you're adventurous, fine starch, is patted on to set the cold cream and absorb the day's mounting oil. This works briefly. By lunchtime, you're already sweating through your protective dusting, and your skin is starting to resemble a marbled cake, white, red, and slightly shiny. If you're attending a special event, a layer of zinc oxide gives you the luminous, slightly ghostly finish considered attractive at the time. If someone asks why you look like you're about to haunt a stately home, you simply raise an eyebrow and quote fashion magazines. Breakouts are inevitable, and the treatment is as much about hope as science. Paste made from lead and vinegar is rumored to clear spots and possibly everything else. But you stick with less dramatic remedies, herbal poultices, honey, or just ignoring the problem and calling it character. If anyone asks, you blame the weather or your nerves. So you face the world, pores valiantly clogged, cheeks glowing with a mix of pride and tallow. Skincare is less about improvement and more about illusion. You're not fixing anything, just layering on charm and a dash of denial. Because in Victorian England, the greatest beauty secret is not flawless skin, but the ability to pretend you have it. Exercise is discouraged, lest you sweat in public and ruin your reputation. Instead, you take a brisk walk in heavy skirts, pray it doesn't rain, and pretend you're out for air. The reality is you're mostly out for a bit of breeze and an excuse to not be inside with Aunt Margaret. In Victorian England, women's bodies are considered delicate machinery, easily thrown out of alignment by too much exertion, strong emotion, or a stiff breeze. Doctors and etiquette books alike warn against strenuous activity, convinced that a woman's main responsibility is not to damage herself or, worse, perspire where someone might witness. Your prescribed fitness routine? A gentle, dignified stroll around the garden or park, ideally at a pace just above standing still. Of course, you are expected to dress for the occasion. There are no athleisure options or trainers. Instead, you layer yourself in the full uniform: corset, chemise, petticoats, stockings, boots, and a hat large enough to interfere with most local bird life. A shawl is draped for modesty, gloves for propriety, and a parasol to defend your complexion against rogue rays of Sunday. You step out looking less like an athlete and more like a well-decorated sofa on parade. The constitutional walk is supposed to refresh both mind and body. In practice, you shuffle along gravel paths, trying to avoid mud, puddles, and the ever-present city refuse. If you're in the country, you dodge chickens, sheep, and the local goose, who regards your skirts as a personal threat. Your gait is short and precise, because too long strides risk scandalizing the neighbors or tripping over your own hem. Heaven forbid you walk briskly enough to actually breathe hard. If your cheeks flush, someone will clutch their pearls and rush to fetch smelling salts. Sweat is the enemy. To glisten in polite society is to court disaster. Handkerchiefs are kept ready for a discreet dab at the temples, but the real goal is to look as cool as a cucumber, no matter how many layers you're sweating through beneath your respectable exterior. Indoor exercise options exist, but are equally restrained. Calisthenics, gentle stretching, light arm waving, possibly touching your toes if nobody's watching, are performed in private, ideally behind closed curtains with a window cracked for air. Some households invest in dumbbells, which look suspiciously like small paperweights, and encourage you to lift them daintily 10 times before calling it a day. Jumping, running, or anything that might jar your constitution is frowned upon. The only women who ride bicycles are French, scandalous, or both. For most, the closest you come to real exertion is dancing. Ballroom events are the hidden gems of Victorian society. Endless waltzes, reels, and quadrilles performed in hot, crowded parlours. After 3 sets, your feet throb and your chemise is quietly damp, but you maintain the illusion of effortless grace. If intimacy is a minefield, you're never truly clean, and neither is your partner. If you're lucky, the heady blend of floral water and wool masks the worst of it. If you're not, every romantic moment is underscored by the question, is that me or you? The Victorian boudoir, supposedly a sanctuary of romance and passion, has its own unique scent profile. Candles flicker, heavy drapes block out the street, and somewhere beneath the covers, the combined aroma of the day's efforts drifts between partners. Scented sachets are stashed under pillows. Rosewater is dabbed on wrists, and yet, the lingering whiff of old laundry and coal smoke is never far away. Nothing says desire like the faint reminder of boiled cabbage. There's a certain choreography to Victorian intimacy. Undressing is a long, awkward process, involving untold layers of hooks, buttons, laces, and social anxiety. Each layer peels away another stratum of the day's accumulated sweat. By the time you reach actual skin, you're both exhausted, slightly tangled, and wondering if you should have just skipped straight to reading poetry. No one talks about this part in etiquette books, of course. Passion is always described in euphemisms: shared affection, tender embraces, glowing cheeks. The reality is slightly damper. Victorian bedrooms are rarely heated after sunset, so both of you rush through undressing, seeking the warmest spot in a cold bed. Blankets pile high to ward off chills, but also trap in every possible scent. There's a reason most couples sleep in separate beds, or at least keep a respectful distance until the last possible moment. But for all the discomfort, there's a surprising tenderness in these stolen moments. Couples, well versed in each other's flaws and fragrances, find humor in their shared predicament. You develop a secret language, raised eyebrows, shared glances, a quick spritz of lavender behind the knee. There's solidarity in mutual imperfection, and a sort of romance in the knowledge that nobody is fresh, but everyone is trying. The practicalities of love are endlessly creative. If you're feeling particularly optimistic, you'll take a quick sponge bath or change into the cleanest nightgown available, but mostly, you rely on optimism and proximity. Sometimes you keep your stockings on for warmth. Sometimes your partner does too. A kiss is sweet, but always tinged with the lingering taste of licorice root or last night's wine. The morning after, you greet the new day with a mixture of fondness and dread. You discreetly check which side of the bed has absorbed more of the night's humidity. You reach for your perfume bottle, hoping to freshen the air before anyone else wakes up. If all else fails, you open the window a crack and claim you simply adore the bracing morning air. Love is blind, but sometimes you wish it were nose-blind too. Still, relationships endure, and sometimes even thrive, in the steamy, unfiltered world of the Victorian boudoir. Romance adapts. You learn to appreciate the closeness, the laughter, and the simple fact that despite all obstacles, two people can still find comfort in a world full of wool, powder, and the ever-present miasma. Because if you can love each other through the haze of Victorian living, layered in petticoats, perfumes, and the faint scent of boiled turnip, then maybe, just maybe, you've found the real thing. And if nothing else, you've certainly found someone willing to laugh with you about it. And that's as good a love story as any. Pregnancy and childbirth are heroic, messy, and fragrant in all the wrong ways. Hygiene during nursing is minimal, You just try to keep the baby alive and hope your natural musk isn't a fire hazard. From the first flutter of morning sickness to the last groggy hour of a sleepless night, a Victorian mother's journey is steeped in scent and sacrifice. The culture of the era treats pregnancy with both awe and a healthy dose of denial. Nobody says the word pregnant out loud. Instead, you are in a delicate condition, a phrase as vague as it is hopeful. Your changing body is to be admired, so long as it isn't actually discussed. The day of birth arrives with a flurry of activity. Midwives, nervous family members, the neighbor who thinks she's an expert, and possibly a doctor if you're lucky or unlucky. Victorian medical intervention was sometimes worse than no intervention at all. The birthing room is stifling, with every window shut tight against dangerous drafts. Sheets, towels, and every available rag are pressed into service. Scented posies or vinegar-soaked cloths are waved about, both as a defense against the air and as a distraction from the situation's less poetic details. Pain relief is minimal, mostly consisting of brandy, prayer, or biting down on the edge of the nearest pillow. The labor itself is long, noisy, and never, ever dainty. Afterwards, there's a sense of triumph and exhaustion, but also a fair amount of cleanup. No running water, no sterile gauze, and precious few towels. The room smells of sweat, tears, and the sharp tang of iron, overlaid by whatever lavender water is within reach. It's a scent that lingers, on sheets, on skin, in memory. Then comes the even messier work. Nursing. In theory, it's the most natural thing in the world. In practice, it's round-the-clock feeding, soothing, changing, and praying the baby is actually attached to the correct part of your anatomy. Victorian baby books recommend frequent washing, but what they mean is wiping down with a damp cloth, since real baths are considered dangerous for fragile infants and overexertion for mothers. Baby clothes and swaddling are rarely more than slightly damp. Linens pile up, but laundry is still a monumental task, so sometimes you just hang things by the window and hope for the best. Nursing is not a private affair. The baby is always with you, day and night, under shawls, inside carriages, or tucked into a makeshift cradle at your feet. The world smells of sour milk, damp cotton, and whatever you last had for lunch. Modesty is prized, but so is survival. You simply hope you can keep your child fed and dry, and that your visitors are too polite to mention the wet patch spreading across your bodice. Illness is a constant threat, and every cough, fever, or strange rash is a source of terror. Remedies range from herbal teas to whispered superstitions. If you're very lucky, you have a helpful mother-in-law. If you're less lucky, she's just there to point out everything you're doing wrong. Through it all, the unique blend of mother and baby lingers everywhere you go. Still, amid the hardship, there are moments of true sweetness. The first sleepy smile, the grip of a tiny hand, the contented sighs of a full belly. The scent of sacrifice never entirely fades, but for many Victorian mothers, it is a badge of honor, proof that you survived, endured, and did your best. Because in the end, love is stronger than lye soap, and a mother's presence, for better or worse, is unforgettable. July arrives, bringing with it a heatwave and no escape. Windows stay closed against bad air. Fans are hand-powered, and every surface is sticky with humidity and old perfume. You fantasize about swimming in the Thames, then remember what's actually floating in it. Summertime in Victorian England is less season of leisure and more endurance sport with extra sweating. The sun beats down through grimy panes, baking the city's bricks and boiling its citizens in layers of wool. The scientific consensus of the era holds that fresh air, especially in cities, is just a fancy name for poison, so the safest choice is to seal up every window and hunker down. It's a sauna, but with more lace. You wake up already sticky, your nightgown glued to your skin. Rolling over, you discover the sheets have adopted your personal aroma, equal parts lavender, talcum, and a dash of regret. Venturing out of bed, your feet slap against floorboards that are somehow both hot and clammy. You throw open a window, only to be bombarded by the scent of horses, rotting vegetables, and, on a lucky day, a faint whiff of someone's failed attempt at fish pie. You slam it shut and reach for your trusty hand fan. The Victorian answer to climate control. Dressing for the heat is a challenge with no winning strategy. Summer fashion demands full petticoats, a high-necked blouse, and of course, a corset. Sheer cotton is permitted, but only in colors that will show every drop of perspiration. You dream of shedding a layer or two, but public decency and family pride have other ideas. You might swap your winter mantle for a lighter shawl, but anything more radical would cause a neighborhood scandal. Once dressed, you begin the day's main activity, seeking shade and pretending to enjoy it. Parlor curtains are drawn tight, trapping heat and making the house as dark as a coal cellar. You drift between rooms with a limp handkerchief and the hope that the next corner will be cooler. Outdoors is no better. The air shimmers above cobblestones. Ladies walk slowly, parasols angled against the blazing sun, faces flushed and eyes desperate for any hint of breeze. The city's horses, too, trudge through the heat, occasionally stopping to nap in their own personal puddles. Hydration is a game of chance. Water is suspicious at the best of times, and in summer it's considered positively reckless. The alternative is warm lemonade, weak beer, or the perpetual cup of tepid tea, all of which leave you thirstier than when you started. If you're especially daring, you risk a lemonade sold from a street cart. Pray you don't see what's actually floating in the pitcher. Evenings promise little relief. Bedrooms are stuffy, pillows sticky, and the household's collective sighs do nothing to move the air. A wet cloth on your forehead and a cold foot bath are the closest you'll get to luxury. Fans are either hand-powered or, if you're truly fancy, a small clockwork contraption that clicks along until it jams, forcing you to start over. Sleep is elusive. Instead, you toss and turn, composing angry letters to the inventor of the corset and wishing for the invention of modern plumbing. Through it all, you carry on, smiling, dabbing at your brow, and pretending that everything is just as it should be. When autumn finally arrives, you celebrate with a ceremonial window opening and a pledge never to complain about cold weather again. Because if you can survive a Victorian summer without fainting in public or dissolving entirely, you've truly earned your stripes. Of sweat, of course. Your maid knows all your secrets, the foot powder in your shoes, the rose water in your drawers, and that time you tried to bathe with gin because it was medicinal. She's seen and smelled it all, and she's still too polite to mention the sock full of lavender under your mattress. In Victorian society, a lady's maid is the silent witness to every moment of dignity and desperation. While the novels paint her as a background character, the reality is she's the real power in your private world. The lady's maid is part confidant, part fixer, and part damage control specialist. Her job is to make sure you appear effortless and unruffled, even when chaos reigns just below the surface. Morning begins not with sunlight, but with the gentle tap-tap at your door. She enters carrying a tray, tea, a crust of bread, maybe a sly smile. She knows if you had a sleepless night. She's seen you sleep through a thunderstorm or wake at the first hint of rain on the window. She's the only one who can tell, by the state of your nightgown, exactly how humid it was under all those blankets. When it's time to get dressed, she lays out your underthings with the precision of a surgeon. She knows which chemise you prefer for less strenuous days, and which drawers can go another round in public. She's an expert in the inside-out trick and the strategic application of rosewater to the truly dire areas. No stain is a surprise, no seam too delicate for her needle. You catch her sometimes, quietly sniffing a petticoat, before handing it over, not to judge, but to gauge whether today will require extra perfume or just another sachet pinned to the bodice. If you're adventurous, she's your accomplice. Remember the night you read about gin baths in a women's magazine and insisted on trying it? She filled the tub, looked the other way as you waded in, and later aired out the towels until the house no longer smelled like a distillery. When you tried dry shampooing with rice flour, she swept up the white trails across the rug. She is discreet about your efforts. Even when your hair powder mixes with sweat and leaves a chalky outline on the settee. Her real superpower is crisis management. A spilled cup of tea, a broken lace, a sudden heat wave. She has a plan for every disaster. When summer arrives, she rotates your dresses on the line to keep the sunniest, freshest option up front. In winter, she knows exactly how to warm a corset by the fire before lacing you in. She is the architect behind every successful escape from a dinner party gone wrong, and the last line of defense against a particularly judgmental aunt. Your maid is a vault of secrets. She knows which relatives you avoid, which bonnets pinch, and which boots have finally surrendered to the London mud. She keeps your confidences and your letters safe, never breathing a word of the time you tripped on your own petticoat and landed in the coal scuttle. If she's ever tempted to laugh, she saves it for the kitchen, far from polite society. In exchange, you offer small kindnesses, a second cup of tea, a cast-off ribbon, a moment of genuine thanks. It's not an even exchange, but in a world built on appearances, trust is its own reward. When you finally collapse into bed at night, you know that tomorrow's dignity is already being mended, starched, and discreetly scented just out of sight. Because in the end, the true guardian of your reputation doesn't wear a bonnet in the drawing room. She's the one who keeps your secrets and your socks safe from the world. Victorian medicine prescribes all manner of freshening routines, from vinegar sponging to patent deodorants made with mercury. None of them really work. Some actively make things worse, but at least you can say you tried. Every era has its health fads, but the Victorians take it to new, dizzying, and sometimes toxic heights. Cleanliness, never quite attainable, becomes an obsession in a world where full baths are a logistical nightmare, and the city itself smells like a stable. Enter the age of creative solutions. Potions, powders, tonics, and tinctures, most of which promise the scent of angels and deliver the aroma of regret. Let's start with vinegar. If you can't bathe, you can at least refresh your body by wiping it down with diluted vinegar. This sharp, nose-wrinkling routine is touted as a cure-all, cleansing, deodorizing, and apparently capable of keeping the plague at bay. Your skin is left tingling, red, and faintly reminiscent of a salad. Braver souls add a few drops of lavender or rose oil, hoping to mask the vinegar's bite. It never works. Instead, you drift through the day in a cloud of eau de pickle, convinced you're the pinnacle of modern hygiene. Not satisfied? There's always the next new thing. By mid-century, deodorant makes its dubious debut in the form of powders, creams, and patent liquids with ingredients you can barely pronounce. Some feature zinc or alum, which might actually absorb sweat. Others are based on camphor, which promises to purify the air around you. A select and unfortunate few are laced with lead, mercury, or arsenic, which are said to whiten the skin, banish blemishes, and, after prolonged use, reduce the need for deodorant altogether by killing you softly, one dab at a time. Perfumers jump into the fray with a dazzling array of colognes and scented waters. Most are gentle: rose, violet, citrus. Others are so strong that one splash could clear a dinner party or empty a tramcar. Patent medicines and apothecaries push aromatic spirits for internal use, meaning you actually drink the stuff. The instructions claim you'll smell like a bouquet. The reality is closer to juniper. Scented regret with notes of nausea. Not all fads involve chemicals. There's the dry brushing craze, where you scrub your skin with a stiff brush until you glow, or at least until you're too tired to care about the sweat. Sea salt washes are recommended for robust constitutions, but most people, after a single freezing experience, quietly return to their vinegar and prayer. If you're desperate enough, you might even try the smoky room cleanse, where you sit in a closed space filled with burning herbs, supposedly to fumigate away body odor. Spoiler, you only succeed in smelling like an overcooked ham. Health magazines and etiquette books are full of hopeful advice. Rub your armpits with lemon, sleep with fresh herbs under your pillow, or take cold air baths by standing naked next to an open window, as long as the neighbors can't see. The result is always the same: temporary relief and a sense of accomplishment, followed by the return of the inevitable Victorian musk. Yet, even as these fads fizzle, you cling to them, because hope springs eternal. Maybe the next tonic, powder, or vinegar rinse will finally work. Maybe you'll wake up smelling like a garden in June instead of the back row at a sheep auction. Because in the great Victorian quest for freshness, failure is always an option. But at least you get points for creativity. Everyone smells, but no one mentions it. Instead, society invents a language of delicate hints, a sudden flurry of fans, an open window, or an aggressive offering of a nosegay. If someone offers you a lemon-scented handkerchief, it's time to panic. Victorian England is a place where reputation is everything, and nowhere is this more evident than in the subtle, silent war against body odor. While every home, street, and drawing room simmers with an unspoken aroma, acknowledging this reality is unthinkable. After all, true decorum lies not in the absence of smell, but in the elaborate rituals designed to politely ignore it. The rules of this invisible game are learned early and practiced daily. At social gatherings, the opening of a window is performed with dramatic nonchalance. Someone stands, stretches, and remarks on how stuffy the air has become. If a breeze happens to clear the air, everyone sighs with relief, grateful for the unspoken assistance. If the smell persists, the fans come out. Every lady flutters her lace-edged fan with rhythmic precision, sending coded signals across the parlor. An especially vigorous fan usually means someone nearby has pushed the boundaries of acceptable freshness. Nosegays, small bouquets of fragrant flowers or herbs, are the essential social accessory. You clutch one to your nose at church, in carriages, or during particularly intimate conversations. A whiff of rosemary or a pinch of violet helps to filter the atmosphere and maintain the illusion that you're surrounded by blooms, not fellow humans marinating in wool. Children are taught to hold their nosegays up for their health. Adults know better. Sometimes, the clues are more direct. An attentive hostess might gently suggest a refreshment break, giving everyone an excuse to step outside and breathe freely, if only for a moment. If you're offered a handkerchief sprinkled with cologne or citrus, consider it both a kindness and a warning. The lemon-scented hanky is the Victorian way of saying, "I care about you, but I care more about my nose." If a friend gifts you a sachet or a tiny vial of eau de toilette, accept graciously and start using it immediately. Conversation is equally coded. No one speaks of sweat or laundry, but euphemisms abound. Heavy weather is blamed for the close air. City living is blamed for persistent scents. If someone refers to a person as robust, earthy, or fond of the outdoors, it's time to check your own armpits. Politeness sometimes extends to outright denial. If an unfortunate gust stirs up something truly unspeakable, everyone simply carries on, eyes fixed on the middle distance, faces serene. Even in the most cramped omnibus or at the most crowded tea party, a stiff upper lip is the order of the day. Discussing the matter would be more scandalous than the smell itself. The truly skilled social navigator anticipates the hazards. She chooses seats upwind, carries 2 handkerchiefs, one for show, one for emergency. and knows exactly how to time her arrival so she's never first into a musty room. In winter, she arranges visits during daylight, when cold air keeps things at bay. In summer, she attends only the briefest gatherings, lest the heat betray everyone's secrets. In the end, Victorian etiquette isn't about being clean, it's about maintaining the fiction of cleanliness. The rituals, fans, and nosegays are less about comfort and more about collective denial. A shared agreement that everyone is fragrant, or at the very least, polite enough to pretend. Because sometimes, survival means keeping your composure and your opinions to yourself. And in Victorian society, the greatest courtesy of all is never, ever mentioning the obvious. When sending a love letter, you spritz it with your favorite perfume, hoping to enchant, not asphyxiate, your beloved. But ink and lavender rarely play nicely together, and sometimes the envelope arrives smelling like a haunted apothecary. In an era before texting, emails, or even reliable telegraphs, the love letter reigns supreme. The Victorian world is a place of longing and delayed gratification. Romance moves at the pace of the Royal Mail, and patience is as vital as passion. Your letter is your voice, your presence, your best hope of making an impression without actually appearing in person, in all your fragrant, sweat-soaked glory. To stand out in a sea of pale blue notepaper, you turn to scent. Perfuming your letter is both an art and a gamble. A few drops of rosewater, a careful dab of violet, or a touch of orange blossom, all are meant to hint at your refinement and hint, ever so gently, at your personal allure. Too little, and your letter blends in with the bills and bank drafts. Too much, and your paramour is left sneezing, eyes watering, clutching at the scented memory of your affection. The process is delicate. First, you write the letter, pages of careful script, equal parts poetry and coded longing. You choose your words with care, hoping they'll survive the journey as elegantly as you sent them. Then comes the critical moment. The perfume. The trick is not to soak the paper, but to waft the scent nearby, perhaps by waving a scented handkerchief over the open envelope, or tucking the pages briefly among the sachets in your lingerie drawer. Some ambitious souls press the letter between sprigs of fresh herbs or a single perfect rose petal. But even the best-laid plans can go awry. Victorian perfumes are potent and not always well-behaved. A rainy day or a slow carriage ride can turn your subtle scent into a runaway disaster. Ink blurs, paper warps, and your delicate script may arrive streaked with evidence of your enthusiasm. If you're unlucky, the local postal clerk is treated to a surprise, opening his mailbag to the scent of wildflowers. Or worse, a whiff of eau de musk and melancholy. Still, the perfumed letter remains the gold standard of romantic correspondence. For those too shy for bold declarations, the scent says what words cannot. I am thinking of you. I wish to be near you. Or at least I don't smell like pickled onions. Lovers exchange letters laced with meaning, both written and aromatic. Some even collect the best-smelling missives, hiding them in secret boxes, or pressing them between the pages of a diary. Sometimes, though, the effort backfires. An unlucky suitor might receive a letter so powerfully perfumed it clears the parlor. Friends and family speculate about the sender. Too bold, says Aunt Edith, fanning herself. Too desperate, sniffs Cousin James. But your beloved may be more forgiving. A scented letter is proof of effort, creativity, and maybe a bit of mischief, a rare personal touch in a world of cold etiquette. Of course, some take things too far, smuggling entire lemon peels or sachets of dried lavender inside their correspondence. The postman learns to fear your handwriting, but love, as ever, is a risk worth taking, because in a time when words and fragrance are the only bridges between hearts, every letter is a gamble, and every perfume, a hope that your affection will travel farther and linger longer than any bouquet ever could. Even in death, the scents linger. Victorian mourning customs involve layers of black wool, months of not bathing, and enough camphor to kill a small horse. Paying your respects means surviving both grief and the miasma rising from the parlour. Death, in Victorian England, is not the quiet, sanitized event it tries to be today. It is a grand, public, and deeply aromatic affair. When a family member passes, everything in the house changes. Curtains drawn, clocks stopped, mirrors covered, and black crepe hung from every available surface. But the real transformation comes with the smell. Mourning, after all, is not just an emotional process, it's a sensory one. First, there's the body itself. Embalming is not yet common for most families, and refrigeration is but a scientist's daydream. The dearly departed is laid out in the best parlour, surrounded by flowers, candles, and well-meaning relatives. Scented posies, vinegar-soaked cloths, and generous handfuls of camphor are pressed into service. The theory is that these will mask the less poetic aspects of mortality. The reality is that they merely layer the air with the unmistakable note of floral panic. The mourners, meanwhile, are on a strict regimen. Black wool is the order of the day, heavy, heat-trapping, and almost impossible to wash without risking a full costume collapse. For widows, mourning can last a year or more, during which time bathing is discouraged. Water is thought to weaken the system during grief, and the only thing getting a regular wash is your lace handkerchief, occasionally soaked in cologne and pressed to your nose for self-defense. Mourning houses have their own particular bouquet, a cocktail of melting wax, old wool, musty upholstery, and the sharp tang of camphor. With the undercurrent of slow decay, no amount of rosewater can fully erase. As friends and neighbours come to pay their respects, the windows stay shut for privacy and tradition. The result is an indoor climate that could best be described as historically preserved. If you attend a funeral, you find yourself in a sea of black, surrounded by people sweating gently into their crepe veils. Every movement raises a cloud of dust, powder, and nostalgia. Muffled sobs and the shuffling of boots mix with the low, ever-present hum of discomfort. Everyone keeps a handkerchief handy, not just for tears, but for an emergency sniff if the parlour gets too oppressive. You soon discover why no one lingers longer than necessary. For those left behind, the duties of mourning continue. Clothes are brushed and aired, but rarely washed. Widows are expected to sleep with a lock of the deceased's hair under their pillow and to wear mourning jewellery, sometimes made from the departed's actual hair, preserved and woven into brooches or rings. You develop a unique nostalgia for the living, hoping the next time you see them, it won't be over a pot of camphor. Gradually, as months pass, black clothing gives way to grey, then lavender, and the house is aired out at last. Yet the scents of loss linger, woven into carpets, caught in folds of clothing imprinted in memory itself. Even years later, a whiff of camphor or melting candle wax can bring it all back. The heavy curtains, the sound of mourning doves, the gentle suffocation of too many people, and not quite enough fresh air. In the end, Victorian mourning is about honouring both the dead and the survivors. If you can emerge with your dignity, your health, and only a faint whiff of camphor, you've done better than most. Because here, even in sorrow, scent is legacy, and history is written not just in tears, but in the air itself. At the dawn of the 20th century, new inventions begin to change everything. Antiperspirant, mass-produced soap, and the shocking idea that maybe you should bathe more than once a fortnight. Hope is in the air, and so is the sweet scent of progress. Imagine, after a lifetime of powder, vinegar wipes, and desperate fanning, waking up to an advertisement for Odorono, the world's first commercial antiperspirant. It promises a life free from underarm anxiety and only occasionally gives you a rash. Early formulas may have been a bit caustic, but for those haunted by the family petticoat, this is nothing short of miraculous. Soap itself transforms too. No longer a precious, crumbly block of lye and fat, but a mass-produced, perfumed marvel. Lifebuoy, Pears, and Sunlight soaps appear on grocers' shelves, smelling less like a candle and more like a meadow after rain. For the first time, you can actually afford to wash all your clothes, and yourself, more than just for Christmas. Bathing becomes a fashionable weekly routine, then twice a week, then, imagine, every day. Victorian grandmothers are horrified. The younger generation can finally tell the difference between their uncles and the family dog by scent alone. Bathrooms themselves get a makeover. Indoor plumbing creeps from the houses of the wealthy into the burgeoning middle class. Running water, flush toilets, and hot taps mean that the old routine of hauling buckets from the well becomes a thing of the past, remembered with nostalgia only by those who never had to do it. The family bathtub moves from the kitchen to a tiled sanctuary of its own. Entire industries spring up around personal hygiene, from shampoos to scented powders, to the radical innovation of toilet water. Not for the toilet, but for you. Perfume evolves too. Instead of hurling musk, civet, and whale barf at unsuspecting relatives, chemists start using synthetic ingredients. Fragrance is no longer just a weapon, it's a pleasure. You can smell like violets, like fresh linen, or like the imaginary hills of Provence. For the first time, choosing your scent becomes an act of self-expression, not self-defense. Fashion follows suit. Corsets are slowly replaced by more breathable undergarments, allowing women to sweat and, this is the dream, even move, without the constant threat of fainting. Lighter fabrics, machine-washable cottons, and shorter hemlines mean that the body finally meets the breeze, not just the laundry line. Advertisements boast freshness and cleanliness in bold type, promising a future where you can run for a tram without being mistaken for a cheese wheel. Social rituals adapt too. The nosegay retires to the history books, and handkerchiefs are embroidered for beauty, not just for battle. Dinner parties benefit from open windows and, eventually, electric fans. Etiquette columns begin to address how to keep fresh in summer, not how to look serene while melting. But perhaps the biggest change is psychological. Cleanliness ceases to be just a virtue or an impossible ideal. It becomes, quite simply, normal. People live longer, feel better, and for the first time in history, can afford to be a little bit smug about how often they bathe. So you stand at the threshold of a new era, ready to embrace the scented future with open and freshly washed arms. The struggle isn't over, but at last, it finally smells like victory. You never leave home without your trusty nosegay, a tiny bouquet of fragrant flowers, herbs, or in desperate times, anything green you can find in the garden. Ostensibly a fashion accessory, it's really a mobile life raft against the onslaught of public odors. When a breeze shifts the wrong way, you raise your posy like a shield and pretend it's just for show, not self-defense. Victorian England is a world saturated with smells. Some charming, most alarming. Long before the invention of pocket-sized deodorant or the subtle miracle of a travel-sized body spray, the nosegay is your best hope. It's the original personal air purifier, except it's made from whatever you haven't yet eaten or boiled for soup. Housewives, children, and high society ladies alike can be seen clutching bunches of violet, rosemary, and mint with a grip more desperate than fashionable. Selecting your nosegay is a daily strategy session. You scan the kitchen garden for anything remotely fragrant. Lavender, if it's in season. A sprig of thyme, if you're feeling bold. On desperate days, even a bruised geranium leaf will do. Urban dwellers, deprived of homegrown options, buy tiny bouquets from flower sellers at street corners sometimes with mysterious filler plants whose sole purpose is to overpower the smell of the fishmonger 2 stalls down. The nosegay is as much about etiquette as it is about comfort. Victorians are experts at not mentioning the obvious. So if you need a moment to recover from a surprise wave of public transport aroma, you simply raise your flower to your face and breathe in discreetly. A practiced flutter of the wrist signals elegance, not panic. If the occasion is truly dire, you can bury your nose and sigh deeply, feigning delight at the scent of crushed basil, while privately counting down the seconds to safety. There is a whole unspoken language to nosegays. Offering one to a friend is a subtle way of saying, "I care about your well-being and mine." Lovers might exchange special posies with hidden meanings. Carnation for fascination, rosemary for remembrance, lemon balm for "I hope you bathe before our next meeting." Even children are given small bunches to keep them healthy, which really means keep them from asking awkward questions about the smell on the omnibus. The fashion implications are not insignificant. Ladies' magazines offer tips on color coordination. Let your nosegay match your bonnet ribbons for maximum effect. Too much green is frowned upon, too little flower, and you risk being mistaken for someone who's given up hope. Silver holders and filigree cones become coveted accessories, with wealthy women vying for the most elaborate design. A status symbol that doubles as a defensive weapon. Of course, nosegays are not infallible. On hot days, flowers wilt and herbs go limp, losing their potency by midday. Some especially robust city odors cannot be conquered by any amount of hyacinth. If you find yourself in a particularly pungent crowd, your only hope is to breathe through your mouth. Hold your nosegay aloft like a talisman, and silently pray for a strong breeze. Still, for all their fragility, nosegays are the unsung heroes of Victorian social survival. They are as much a part of your arsenal as your gloves, your fan, and your ability to smile through adversity. When evening falls and you return home, your flowers are wilted, but your dignity remains intact. A small price to pay for one more day above the city's aromatic fray. Because in a world without deodorant, the best you can do is carry your garden with you and hope it blooms just a little longer than the smell of the street. Travel isn't glamorous. It's a slow, rattling nightmare in a stagecoach packed with other people, their luggage, and their unique olfactory contributions. The windows are stuck shut, everyone is sweating in their Sunday best, and the only thing more oppressive than the body heat is the stench of a half-eaten pie fermenting on the floorboards. Motion sickness becomes a mercy. You arrive at the coaching inn full of naive optimism. Your bonnet is straight, your gloves are clean, and your ticket is clutched in a hopeful hand. 5 minutes later, your resolve melts like butter on a July afternoon. The stagecoach stands before you, creaking under its own history, splintered benches, tired horses, and a driver who looks like he bathes once a season on a dare. Luggage is stacked precariously on top, threatening to crush any sense of personal space or optimism. Climbing aboard, you quickly realize that assigned seating is a myth. Instead, it's a scrum of elbows, trunks, and over-perfumed travelers all jostling for a square foot of bench. You wedge yourself between a mustachioed gentleman who has apparently confused mothballs with cologne and a grandmother cradling a basket of onions. The air is already thick, a stew of old wool, hair tonic, damp boots, and someone's lunch slowly making its presence known. The doors slam shut, and, with a lurch, you are off at the breathtaking speed of a brisk walk. The windows, supposedly for ventilation, are jammed tightly shut with age and disuse. The air grows warmer, closer, and more fragrant with each passing mile. Conversation is kept to a minimum, partly from politeness, partly from a desire to conserve what little oxygen remains. Every jolt of the coach sends a new wave of aromas wafting up from beneath the seats, rotten apple cores, old newspapers, and the unmistakable hint of something long dead and better forgotten. Stagecoach travel is not for the faint of heart or sensitive of nose. There are no rest stops. Only the occasional roadside inn where you and your fellow sufferers pour out, gasping, to stretch cramped limbs and inhale the comparatively fresh smell of manure and fried fish. The break is brief. Soon you are herded back into the rolling oven. Your dress clings to you, a damp reminder that fashion and function parted ways long ago. Meals are their own adventure. Should you risk the cold pie offered by the innkeeper, or rely on the emergency biscuit stashed in your reticule? If you do eat, you hope it won't come back to haunt you when the coach hits a particularly bumpy patch. Motion sickness, once feared, becomes a friend. The promise of a few blissful, if queasy, moments when you no longer notice the smell. As hours drag on, tempers fray. Children whimper, gentlemen snore, and the grandmother's onions become the unofficial mascot of the journey. You pass the time by counting sheep out the window or inventing new words for unwashed. If you're lucky, you nap. If you're unlucky, your neighbor does, slumping gently onto your shoulder. Finally, after what feels like a week, but was actually only 40 miles, you tumble out of the coach, hair flattened and dignity slightly wilted. The breeze is a revelation. You promise yourself you'll never complain about city smells again, at least not until you need to travel home. For in Victorian travel, you don't just arrive at your destination, you earn it, one sniff at a time. Every household has its own secret weapon against odor, usually involving lemons, vinegar, and a faith that borders on delusion. You dab lemon peel behind your ears, sprinkle vinegar on your linens, and sometimes just wave a sprig of mint around the room while muttering hopeful incantations. Modern air freshener this is not. The Victorian home is a living experiment in trial and error freshness. Open a linen closet and you'll find little bags of dried lavender and rose petals tucked into every corner, each one an act of olfactory optimism. Dried orange peel hangs from the mantel, supposedly absorbing foul airs. Entire families swear by the cleansing power of fresh parsley, which is as effective at eliminating odor as it is at preventing heartbreak. Not very, but you never stop hoping. Lemon is the universal cure-all. Have a bad smell? Lemon. Stale air? Lemon. Aunt Mildred's socks threatening to clear the room? Lemon. Sliced thin and left in strategic places. The zest is dabbed onto handkerchiefs and even rubbed on the family dog. If you have a little extra coin, you might invest in imported lemons and proudly display them in a glass bowl. It is both a status symbol and a subtle warning to any passing odor that you mean business. Vinegar, sharp and assertive, is the secret sauce of the determined Victorian homemaker. Linens and underthings are soaked in it. Chamber pots are rinsed with it. Stubborn patches of parlour gloom are attacked with a vinegar-soaked rag. Some even claim that sipping a spoonful will purify you from the inside out. Your mouth puckers, your eyes water, but you feel cleansed, at least until the next meal of pickled herring and boiled cabbage resets the cycle. Sachets and potpourri are the height of homemade sophistication. Gathered rose petals, cloves, cinnamon bark, and nutmeg are sewn into little muslin bags and tucked into drawers, shoes, and, in moments of real desperation, corsets. You might spend an entire afternoon boiling apples with cinnamon and declaring the resulting aroma better than Paris. If the house still smells, you simply add more sachets and hope nobody notices the undertone of wet dog and despair. On a truly dire day, desperate times call for creative measures. Mint and rosemary are waved around like magic wands. Some households try simmering vinegar on the stove, producing a heady fog that drives family and flies alike into the garden. Charcoal pans are placed in musty rooms to draw out the miasmas, though their only real achievement is a sooty thumbprint on every doorknob. Superstition mixes freely with science. Grandmothers insist on hanging camphor balls near beds to ward off illness, while children are sent to bed with sprigs of thyme under their pillows. Some even put slices of bread on the mantel, convinced that stale bread absorbs evil smells. It doesn't, but it does invite mice. which present their own olfactory challenges. And, of course, hope springs eternal. Every new suggestion from the ladies' magazine is tested with breathless anticipation. If something seems to work, it is praised endlessly. If it fails, it's quietly forgotten. And life goes on, lemon-scented or not. Because in the Victorian household, there are as many home remedies as there are homes, and every family's secret weapon is just another story in the long, heroic struggle against the smell of real life. Lemon peels, vinegar, and a touch of wishful thinking. Sometimes, that's all you need to keep your chin up and your nose, at least for a moment, in the clear. Victorian period care is creative. Rags are reused, laundered in cold water, and hung to dry behind a curtain with all the discretion of a marching band. Scented sachets and rosewater do battle with biology, but everyone just pretends the situation doesn't exist. If you look pale at breakfast, people blame female nerves, not the fact you spent all night strategizing how to minimize collateral olfactory damage. For Victorian women, menstruation is the monthly event that must never be mentioned, acknowledged, or, heaven forbid, discussed in public. If it must be referenced at all, it's under a thick fog of euphemism, the courses, the visitor, or simply a turn. You're expected to maintain a calm, delicate demeanor, even as you're quietly inventing new ways to survive what is, in reality, a recurring hygiene crisis. Let's start with supplies. There are no disposable pads or tampons, no discreet plastic wrappers or perfumed wipes. Instead, you rely on homemade cloth rags, soft if you're lucky, scratchy if you're not. These are folded, layered, and fastened with pins or tucked into drawstring undergarments. If you're especially fortunate, your mother or older sister has a tried and tested method. Otherwise, you improvise and hope for the best. After use, the ritual of cleaning begins. Rags are soaked and scrubbed, often in cold water, hot water being reserved for life and death matters or the Lord's own laundry. Privacy is a luxury. So you wash and hang your rags behind a curtain, under a bed, or near the stove, anywhere they might dry quickly, and avoid the inquisitive noses of younger siblings, male relatives, or, worst of all, the family dog. Odor management is a desperate, ongoing campaign. Sachets of lavender or dried rose petals are slipped into linen drawers and sometimes even sewn directly into undergarments. Rosewater is dabbed liberally behind the ears, on wrists, and, in moments of real need, across the lower belly, an aromatic Hail Mary meant to convince yourself, and everyone else, that nothing out of the ordinary is happening. Some women chew parsley, believing it might sweeten the breath and, by some magical extension, all other bodily scents. Science is not consulted. Physical discomfort is treated with stoic silence, or the occasional lie down in a darkened room. If you're pale or peevish, it's nerves, or the weather, never cramps. Hot water bottles exist, but are a rare luxury. Most settle for a folded flannel and a stiff upper lip. Should a stain appear, there is a mad dash to change chemises, soak and scrub, and pretend that nothing happened. Bloodstains are blamed on nosebleeds or a minor household accident. You become a master of plausible deniability. In social settings, you monitor your every move, crossing your legs, standing up slowly, checking the back of your skirt with subtle, acrobatic contortions. These are second nature. The fear of a telltale spot or an errant odor is enough to make anyone faint, which is at least conveniently fashionable in Victorian society. Through it all, everyone maintains the fiction that nothing is amiss. Mothers pass on whispered advice. Friends exchange nervous glances and coded warnings. It is a secret club with no handshake, only a knowing nod across the breakfast table. So you soldier on, sachet in place, rosewater at the ready, surviving another round of the monthly mystery. And when it's over, you pack away the evidence, grateful for one more month of quiet triumph over biology, laundry, and the unyielding rules of Victorian propriety. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a Victorian woman does is just pretend, nose held high, smile unwavering, and not a word spoken about the struggle beneath the skirts. Dogs, cats, and the occasional caged bird roam freely through your Victorian home, adding their own signature to the family aroma. Wet dog mingles with hair oil, while cat boxes are tucked behind lace screens in the parlor. It's a delicate dance to outsmell the family spaniel. And honestly, some days you lose. Pets are the pride of many a Victorian household, symbols of status, affection, and, occasionally, chaos. The Queen herself is famously fond of her Pomeranians, and middle-class families follow suit. Every child begs for a kitten, every matron coos over a canary, and every self-respecting gentleman believes a hound or two completes his home. But no etiquette book prepares you for the daily olfactory battles waged beneath your own roof. Let's begin with dogs. They are everywhere, curled under chairs, stretched across hearthrugs, or standing sentinel at the front door. Rain or shine, they track the outside world inside, leaving trails of damp fur, muddy paw prints, and an aroma that lingers like an old scandal. After a walk, your spaniel shakes enthusiastically, sending a fine mist of Thames water and mystery across your upholstery. Attempts to towel dry are met with squirming resistance. So most days you just accept that your settee will never smell like rosewater again. Cats, meanwhile, conduct themselves with regal indifference. They curl in window seats, nap on your freshly pressed linen, and shed with the regularity of clockwork. Their facilities are tucked discreetly behind folding screens or under side tables, but their presence is known to every guest with a nose. You sprinkle fresh earth, scented herbs, and, on desperate occasions, a scoop of coal ash, hoping to keep the worst of it at bay. Yet somehow, even the most fastidious feline can defeat your arsenal of powders and potpourri. Birds add their own piquant notes. The canary's cage is an ever-present fixture, chirping from the sunniest corner and sprinkling feathers and seed hulls with abandon. Every so often, someone forgets to change the water, and the resulting scent reminds everyone that nature, even when caged, finds its way into the parlor. Then there are the less common pets, ferrets, hedgehogs, rabbits, all kept by children or eccentric uncles. They require boxes, baskets, or makeshift dens, and offer an endless stream of bedding to launder, cages to scrub, and odors to neutralize. Your maid is forever trailing a cloth soaked in vinegar or lemon, waging a losing battle against the cumulative perfume of fur and feathers. Victorian solutions are creative, if not always effective. Sachets of lavender are hung from pet collars. Rose petals are scattered under chairs and woven into animal bedding. Some households experiment with cologne, much to the confusion of every dog in the district, while others resort to simply airing out rooms and pretending the breeze is responsible for that mysterious musk. Of course, family life marches on. Children sneak bits of roast under the table. Guests pretend not to notice the paw prints on their gloves. And everyone learns to live with a little extra character in the air. Complaints are met with cheerful deflection. Oh, that's just Jasper. He does so love a muddy walk. Laughter, after all, covers a multitude of smells. At the end of the day, the parlor is a tapestry of life. Wool, cologne, coal, and, yes, the unmistakable presence of beloved pets. You fluff the cushions, scatter another handful of petals, and accept the truth. In a Victorian home, there is no masking every scent, because sometimes the only thing stronger than parlor perfume is the loyalty of a good dog and the silent, knowing gaze of a cat who's just claimed your favorite chair. So tonight, as you tuck into your soft, fresh sheets and drift off in your clean, climate-controlled bedroom, maybe take a moment to thank the universe for hot showers, laundry detergent, and the modern miracle of deodorant. Because surviving Victorian womanhood wasn't just about dodging tight corsets or awkward dinner conversations, it was about waging a daily, invisible war against the world's most stubborn smells. You made it through the layers of wool, the weekly baths that barely counted, the marathon dinner parties held hostage by bad ventilation, and the relentless battle against your own petticoats. You endured public transport packed like a can of slightly damp sardines, and you learned to wield perfume, lemon peels, and nosegays like weapons in the great olfactory struggle of the 19th century. But the story of Victorian women is more than just suffering and sweat. It's a testament to the human spirit, our ability to survive, adapt, and even laugh in the face of discomfort. For every day spent in woolen agony, there was a night of whispered jokes,